Hello and welcome back to Critical Vision TV. I am sorry for my absence, but don't worry, I haven't given up making videos and there's plenty of content to come. I thought I would make this video as it felt absolutely necessary. You see, when I make a video about Islam, I keep it simple and clear, and most of you can appreciate and understand the video. However, there's always a few usual suspects who pop up with the usual comments. I don't understand the argument. Or, shut up bruv, you're going to hell. And many of you are left wondering, why are they actually like this? Well, there's lots of reasons, but ultimately it's a sad tale of the psychological dangers of high control religions and cults. So I'm going to point out some of those dangers and the effects they have on people, whilst also sharing some of my own personal experiences.
You're watching Critical Vision TV.
I'll start by saying this video is not an attack on religion. It's a warning about high control religions and cults and how they affect people. You may be wondering, what do I actually mean by high control? I mean a group or a belief system which exercises extreme amounts of control over individuals down to an extreme detail, dictating how an individual should sleep, eat, drink, put their clothes on and off, how they should view different types of people, who they can and can't be friends with. As I'm sure you know by now, I myself was indoctrinated into one of those belief systems and followed it for the best part of a decade. And I'm well versed with how they operate and their effects on people. On a foundational level, high control religions and cults are effective by having particular psychological effects on their adherents. The primary one being a heightened feeling of fear and guilt. In the past, I used to worry deeply about hellfire, Jahannam, the internalized constant fear of doing something wrong or not doing enough good, then being tortured relentlessly for thousands of years to potentially all of eternity. This can lead to extreme levels of fear and constant worry, fearful that in some way something that someone says or does could be a form of disobedience and will earn them relentless constant burning and torture. I'll share a personal story of mine in my late teens when I was knee-deep in Islamic fundamentalism. You see, as a Muslim, I was taught that when we are dead in our graves, an angel would come to us, and that the first thing you'd be questioned about and held accountable for was your maintenance of the salah, the prayer. I can remember one day a relative was giving me a lift home once, and I'd noticed the time and that I was late for Salatul Asr, which is the third prayer of the day. I was immediately panicked and imagined what if the car was to crash and I was to die. Thinking of that scenario and being questioned by one of Allah's angels about my lateness in terms of the prayer, and that it could get me thrown into the depths of hell and tortured for potentially thousands of years. Looking back on it, obviously, I now realize that mindset was both unhealthy and incredibly ridiculous. But worryingly, to some Muslims, that amount of guarding the prayer is seen positively, being a sign of strong iman or faith. Reality check. It's not good, it's dangerously unhealthy and a risk to mental well-being to think that way. But what's most concerning is that this type of mindset is exactly what's being instilled into children's minds all across the globe. High control religions rely upon this heightened sense of fear and guilt, but they are deeply unhealthy and have long-term consequences on individuals. It can afflict the most vulnerable with conditions such as anxiety and depression, and it can even cause deep-rooted trauma and lead to things such as PTSD. The next psychological danger I want to talk about is the suppression of critical thinking. You see, a belief system such as Islam claims to be from an all-knowing God. Therefore, it has to be considered completely perfect for all people, places, times, and circumstances. In other words, for a Muslim, it becomes impossible to concede or even entertain the idea that Islam might be wrong. And because they're incapable of entertaining the idea that it might be wrong, everything else has to be perceived as wrong, and therefore they end up doing extreme mental gymnastics to defend the indefensible and justify the unjustifiable. Seriously, just go and watch clips of Muslims doing dawah and watch them try to defend and justify Muhammad's marriages to Aisha and Safiya. But this can also lead to internalized guilt for questioning or doubting. I can once remember I actually stumbled upon a documentary about problems with cousin marriage in the UK's Muslim community. I was exposed to severe congenital birth defects, genetic disorders and disabilities as a consequence of cousin marriages. I was a Muslim when I came across this, and it led me to feel guilt just because I started to then have some questions, and I started questioning, why would an all-knowing and all-merciful God permit this? Wouldn't he know the basic genetic science behind his own creation? As I said, I was a Muslim when I came across this and started having these questions. And because I saw Islam as being good and perfect, I started to feel guilt just for raising those logical questions in my own mind, like I was wrong for thinking that way. Another issue with the suppressed critical thinking aspect is that it can cause people to have a black and white mentality and a group dependency. By black and white mentality, I mean an individual's thinking and viewpoint is limited to seeing things as either being this or that. Everything in the world can be viewed as between us and them, good and bad. No in between, no consideration for any other factors and variables in anything. And as a result of putting people into categories between us and them, you get group dependency, and this ultimately diminishes an individual's individual thinking. The view can become that the us believes what's correct, and therefore the them is wrong. And because the group is viewed as having to be right, that can cause individuals to just blindly side with the group. And not only defend the group because the group has to be right, but the group will defend them. It's basically a survival mechanism and social safety net, but it does diminish someone's ability to think as an individual. I can remember when I was a Muslim and I watched Ali Dawah debate Apostate Prophet. Yeah, that was uncomfortable and awkward. I remember that Apostate Prophet responded to pretty much everything Ali said, and posed several questions back to him, and Ali couldn't answer a single one, especially questions regarding Muhammad's statements on the sun. Ali Dawah was squirming, dodging every question, and resorted to ad hominem attacks constantly, and it was quite childish and embarrassing. But what amazed me and stuck with me after that debate was the comments on the video of the debate by Muslims. MashaAllah, Ali, you smashed him. I was left thinking, sorry, did we just watch the same video? I was a Muslim when this happened and I found it deeply embarrassing. But it left me wondering, why are we actually like this? Fast forward a few years, here I am, an open, happy ex-Muslim telling you why they're like this. I even get the blind group dependency with comments on my videos, which is quite sad but also a bit funny. The next set of dangers I'm going to talk about are issues concerning identity, confidence, and self-esteem. The black and white mentality and group dependency can also lead to trust issues, especially if an individual within the group doubts or questions the ideas, statements, or behaviour of another group member. This can lead to trust issues as they're always expected to try and be part of the group and side with the group, knowing that something is wrong, but not having the freedom to act or think freely or individually. That causes friction and can cause issues in trust. And again, because they have internalized disagreement or questioning, this can lead to internalized guilt, which can lead to social isolation, potentially. And because their identity is with that group, when they're isolated, this can cause identity confusion. And this is how friction is caused and exists within these people a lot of the time. Being part of a high control religion or cult can have similar effects on someone as an abusive relationship does, and it can cause what's known as Stockholm Syndrome. Feelings of love, gratitude and attachment to their abuser and oppressor. I mentioned this briefly in my last video. If someone's in an abusive relationship, family and friends might try and warn them about the red flags and try and reach out and help them. But the abused will often become defensive of their abuser's behaviour and ignore the warning signs, and sometimes they may even become aggressive in their defence of their abuser out of a feeling of needing to have love or gratitude towards them and not recognising that they're actually being abused. With high control religions, you get the exact same, and you actually see it a lot at Speaker's Corner. There's quite a few clips online where someone will be debating against a Muslim, for example, and they might make a statement against Islam or ask them a question, a very deep and complex question about Islam, and the Muslim trying to defend Islam can suddenly become quite confrontational and even aggressive. Of course, it's not all Muslims at Speaker's Corner who do this, but most violent incidents at Speaker's Corner have been done by Muslims, and that's not really a surprise, seeing as it's the most heavily represented high-control belief system that attends there regularly. Stockholm Syndrome is a danger of high-control religions, and their adherents will go to extreme lengths to defend their abuser, as they don't actually realize that they're victims of abuse. Another danger of high control religions is the overwhelming control they have over the simplest things within daily life. These types of control can have a long-lasting effect on an individual, so long-lasting that it can even affect them if they're fortunate enough to leave the group. Even me, to this day, I still find myself putting my right shoe on first, entering the bathroom with my left foot first, entering my home with my right foot first, because the habit sticks in the brain. In terms of eating, I can't really eat pork products. The furthest I've got to is Haribo's, and I've spoken to other ex-Muslims that have experienced similar things, where they've been told for years that it's dirty and unclean, and even though they come to know that Islam as a religion is nonsense and leave it, even years after, they still have internal discomfort with the thought of eating pork products, purely because of the ideas that were drummed into the brain so frequently. Another quite serious danger is when certain ideas are drummed into you and then in reality, your ideas and reality clash. For example, you are fed certain ideas about certain groups of people, and you tend to believe them as literal truth, but then as time goes on and you get more life experience, you may interact with some of those people and find the views you were taught were actually quite bigoted and didn't match the reality. For example, I used to have pretty bigoted views about people who are gay because of the information that I was being fed, essentially. But then as time went on, I had more real-world experience, and I had neighbours and work colleagues who were gay, and I didn't really have an issue. But what I did notice was what I was told to think of them didn't match reality. They were just regular people, just inclined a bit differently, and ultimately what someone does in their own privacy doesn't really affect me. Growing up and having more life experiences outside of the particular group I was dependent on did help me realize that these views that were stipulated within the group were profoundly wrong and actually quite bigoted. But members of high control religions are led to believe that the views of the group are absolutely correct in every way, which can then be quite uncomfortable when you're confronted by reality and the views you were told don't match. This can leave the high control religions' adherents to suppress their own doubts rather than confront them and try and resolve them in a natural and constructive way. And because they're not confronting and thinking critically, this can cause mental discomfort and lead to cognitive dissonance. I'm going to talk now briefly about the long-lasting damage caused by high control religions, because a lot of the damage it does is long-lasting, even if the adherents are fortunate enough to leave. I spoke briefly earlier about identity confusion, but I spoke about it when it's within the group. The problem is, identity confusion can even occur when someone has left. This is an example of how the damage high control religions do can be long lasting. You see, for many of those who are ex-members of high control religions, once they have been honest enough with themselves to admit they no longer believe, and when they actually try to leave, they end up losing quite often family members, the community, friends, essentially their whole world and paradigm of existence, their whole safety net in existence, gone. And when you've been brave enough to confront the reality that everything you had was a lie and it was wrong, and also brave enough to step out and leave it, because it's everything you knew and had, there becomes an issue of, well, what next? What do I do now? Where do I go? Certain ideas are so heavily ingrained that actually thoughts of guilt and shame in some individuals can still linger after they've left, even after knowing that it was all nonsense and they believed the wrong things. The same feelings of internalized guilt that they had when they was part of the group, they still feel after they've left. And this means people can go through life, even after having left, carrying a moral injury. Another lasting trauma is betrayal trauma, and that can affect someone for life. It's hard to live with the fact that you were unintentionally lied to by those closest to you for years upon years of your life. When you realize you were unintentionally lied to, and it was by those closest to you, your friends, your mum, your dad, teachers, community leaders, it takes a toll on you. Even when someone takes that brave step to leave, they still live with the fact that they were lied to by people so close and that they fell for the lie. It can be quite similar to someone falling victim to a scam or a form of fraud. The damage isn't just financial, it also leaves lasting psychological damage on someone. Besides the fact that they've lost their own money, it's also the fact that they were deceived and fell for it. Their own judgment was wrong. Now, think about when your whole paradigm of existence is to believe a certain thing is correct, and then you realize it's not correct, and you was taught it by your own parents, for example, by every one of your friends, by teachers, almost every day of the week. And then you realize it's a lie, and you fell for it. You wasted all that time. How are you meant to trust your own judgment again? Do you see? So even if someone is fortunate enough to leave the high control religion, they can still be left with severe trust issues, realizing that they may not be able to trust their own judgment because of what they fell for before, for several years. Overall, high control religions and cults pose multiple dangers to individuals and wider society. The damage they inflict on people is long-lasting and can still affect people even if they are fortunate and brave enough to step out and leave. I made this video to warn and educate people on a very basic level. In the future, I may well do more videos going deeper into this subject and sharing more of my personal experiences and different scenarios. If you are watching this and you're trapped in a high control religion or cult, or maybe you know someone that is, just know that you're not alone. You're not the first person to experience it, and you're certainly not going to be the last. There are people you can reach out to for help. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this video, and if you've enjoyed, please like and subscribe. I only went into things on a very basic level. I am going to do future videos delving deeper into psychology, particularly how high control religions and cults affect someone on a psychological level, but I just felt this video was necessary to make at a very basic level. Take care, and please, for your own good, stay away from high control religions and cults. Believe me, I know just how bad they are.